18. That's the number of bodies left in the wake of a single man's unraveling. And for years, the clinical term for what created him was something you've probably heard 100 times: a break, a psychotic break, a snap. The story we tell ourselves about sudden violence always starts the same way. Something inside him just broke one day, and the person he was ceased to exist. The brain, we say, just shattered. But here's the problem with that story. It's not what the scans show. When forensic psychiatrists finally sat down with the surviving testimony, the childhood records, the school reports, and the medical logs of the man who left those 18 behind, they found something they did not expect. There was no clean break, no single day where the switch flipped. What they found was a pattern of small, invisible fractures that had been forming since he was 7 years old, and every single one of them had been missed by the professionals tasked with seeing them. If you've ever read a headline about a mass casualty event and felt a dull, helpless confusion, how did no one see this coming? You already know the feeling of standing inside that gap between what the system is designed to catch.
Growth
and
starts here.
What
when
it
faced with a
actually
branching decision,
catches.
observe how the
And
path
that
diverges,
gap,
leading
it
to different
turns out,
outcomes.
is where most of these stories begin. The official story that most therapists still learn goes like this. Trauma happens, the mind builds a protective shell around it, and if that shell is strong enough, the person appears functional. They hold jobs, they make conversation, they pay rent. The shell looks like healing, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. The problem is that a shell is not a repair. A shell is a wall. And what happens inside a wall when nobody is looking? The first victim that made the clinicians pause was not one of the 18. It was the man himself, years before he became a headline. At age 7, he was brought to a school psychologist after he drew a picture that the teacher described as disturbingly detailed. The drawing showed a figure with its insides on the outside, neatly labeled in a child's handwriting. The psychologist noted it in a file and recommended continued observation. No intervention, no follow-up. The drawing went into a drawer. That anomaly, the missed sign, is not rare. A study conducted across 4 major urban school districts found that 72% of children who later exhibited severe behavioral escalation had produced at least one piece of identifiable concerning artwork or writing before the age of 10. Only 12% of those cases received any kind of structured clinical response. The rest were filed, forgotten, or labeled as phases. Now consider the second missed sign. At age 11, he was hospitalized for 3 days after punching a window and severing a tendon in his right hand. The hospital record states that he showed no remorse and flat affect during the interview. The discharge diagnosis was adjustment disorder. No psychiatric follow-up was scheduled. The hand healed. The circuit did not. And this is where
the process from hospital discharge to being fully healed is not always a direct path.
The most widely used risk assessment tools in clinical psychology, like the HCR-20 and the PCLR, are designed to catch patterns in adults. They work reasonably well for adults, but
HCR-20 and PCLR are commonly used risk assessment tools. As we examine closer, we see they apply specifically to adults.
Are still being myelinated until the age of 25. A 7-year-old who draws violence is not a predictor in the way a 28-year-old who draws violence is. The system is calibrated for the finished product, not the blueprint. The third crack comes from a longitudinal
Blueprint is just the beginning. The finished product shows the result of hard work and iteration.
Dysregulation from ages 6 to 30. By age 25, 61% had no criminal record. 39% did. The 39% shared one trait that the 61% did not: cumulative missed interventions. They had not simply been flagged once, they had been flagged an average of 4.7 times, and each flag had been ignored or downgraded. The man who left 18 bodies did not explode. He was compressed. Here is the hidden truth that forensic neurology has been sitting on for the better part of a decade.
As we explore our thoughts, symbolized by the glowing brain, we use focus to reveal the complex neural pathways beneath the
end
surface.
stage of a cascade of micro-failures in the brain's threat detection and reward systems. Failures that begin forming in childhood, but only cross the visible threshold when the person reaches a specific environmental trigger. The brain does not break. It reaches its tolerance limit. The amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are locked in a constant negotiation throughout development. The amygdala screams threat.
As the brain develops from childhood to adulthood,
"Wait,
the prefrontal cortex
check the
grows,
data."
improving its
In a
ability
healthy
to
brain,
regulate the amygdala's
prefrontal
threat response.
cortex wins most of the time. In the brain that produces mass violence, the amygdala gets progressively louder, while the prefrontal cortex gets progressively quieter, not because it was destroyed, but because it was never trained to counter the signal. And the training happens in the missed moments, the drawing that was ignored, the hospitalization that was not followed up, the flat affect that was labeled a phase. Each missed intervention is a missed opportunity to strengthen the prefrontal cortex's braking system. Each one is a turn of the compression screw. If you have ever watched the news after one of these events and thought there must have been signs, you were right. But the signs were not cryptic signals hidden in a locked journal. They were written in plain language in school files, medical records, and police reports that were never cross-referenced. The system is not blind. It is fragmented. The left hand never knows what the right hand drew at age 7. You now know something that most jury members do not. The single best predictor of later severe escalation is not a single act of violence. It is a pattern of low-level, clinically ignored signals that accumulate across childhood and adolescence. 2 signals that remain unaddressed triple the risk. 4 signals multiply it by a factor of 7. The question is not why we missed the break. The question is why we keep calling it a break when the evidence shows a slow, decade-long corrosion. The transformation path, uncomfortable as it may be, starts with changing the metaphor. If clinicians stopped thinking about a psychotic break and started thinking about a pressure valve that was never installed, the entire triage system would shift.
In this triage
Early
model, we
intervention
bypass
would
mere
not
prediction.
be about
The
predicting
goal is
who
to
will
install an
upset.
impulse brake.
It would be about strengthening the braking circuit in every child who shows up with a drawing too detailed to ignore. But this is just the surface of what the data reveals. In the next chapter of this investigation, we trace the specific neural firing pattern that occurs in the 6 months before the visible act, a pattern that has been recorded in brain scans of 23 individuals who later committed similar acts. That pattern has a signature, and it is detectable. The question is whether we are willing to look for it.
You're running out of time.
Before the count
Make sure you get
reaches
this done before you turn
18.
18.
For now, sit with this. The next 18 victims are probably already in a file somewhere. The only thing standing between them and a headline is whether someone reads that file before the pressure exceeds the metal. One of the most damning pieces of evidence comes from a study of 142 threat assessment reports filed by school districts in the 3 years.
As we look at the timeline, we see the steady progression over 3 years. But then, as shown by the lightning bolt, a significant incident takes place.
Cases, at least one report had been filed that explicitly mentioned violent ideation or detailed planning. In 68% of those cases, the report never left the district office. It was not forwarded to law enforcement, not shared with mental health services, not logged in any central database. The fragmentation is not a failure of individual intent. It is a structural design flaw in how we process threat information. A school psychologist sees a concerning drawing and files a report. The report sits in a district cabinet. A social worker sees a flat affect and files a note. The note stays in a medical chart. A police officer takes a statement about a threat made in the hallway. The statement enters a local record system that no other jurisdiction can query. These are not different problems. They are the same signal, recorded 3 times in 3 separate silos by 3 different professionals who never speak to one another. The brain of a developing
illustrates
child
the incredible
is
potential
a
within the developing
system.
brain.
The network
See how the neural
designed to
pathways light up from the
safeguard
center.
it
We
is
tend to
not.
fragment our
If this
understanding of
pattern
things like
sounds
school,
familiar,
health, and
it
law.
should.
And
It
doesn't
is the
that feel
same
familiar?
fragmentation that lets a child slip through the cracks of the foster system, the juvenile justice system, and the special education system simultaneously. Each system believing the other is watching, while the child walks through the gap between them. The gap is not a black hole. It is a series of locked doors with nobody holding the master key. The forensic psychiatrists who reconstructed the timeline of the man who left 18 bodies found that between the ages of 7 and 22, he had been evaluated by 17 different professionals: psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, emergency room doctors, probation officers, a psychiatrist, a neurologist. 17, and not one of them knew that any of the others had seen him. Each evaluation started from zero, as if his history began the moment they opened their own file. The result was 17 fragments of a portrait that, if assembled, would have shown a clear trajectory. The fragments never met. You now know more about what actually drives a killer's brain than 90% of the people who sit on juries. That is not arrogance. It is
This
data.
90% figure is critical to understanding the outcome, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Keep looking at what the system
We tend to keep certain truths ignored, locked away in our minds.
There is
but
a
by
reason
looking closely,
these cases
by allowing
keep
them to be
producing the same haunting question. We have the tools to see the pattern. We have the data to predict the trajectory. We have the professionals in place to intervene. What we do not have is the will to connect the dots before the picture becomes a crime scene. The evidence has been sitting in drawers for decades. The drawings, the reports, the hospital records, the flat effect notations, the threat assessments that never traveled from one desk to another. The full picture was always there. It just never met itself, and that is the most unsettling truth of all. We do not lack the knowledge to prevent these tragedies. We lack the infrastructure to use the knowledge we already have. 17 professionals looked at the same child, and because they never compared notes, they saw 17 different children. The system is not broken in the dramatic way we imagine. It is broken in the quiet, bureaucratic way that allows a pressure valve to rust shut over 15 years while everyone assumes someone else is checking the gauge. The next time you see a headline about a mass casualty event and feel that familiar confusion, ask yourself a different question. Not how could this have been missed, but rather how many children right now are sitting in classrooms with drawings in their backpacks
This
that no
chaotic
one is
data needs to
connecting
reach
to
the district
file in
office.
The district
The current
office
process is
3
failing.
blocks away.
How much time do you
The
lose
answer
waiting?
is not a mystery. The data is clear. It is happening at a rate we could measure if we chose to. We have the scans, we have the statistics, we have the case files. What we do not have is the collective courage to admit that calling it a break was never an explanation. It was an
The evidence
excuse
has
to
been
stop
mounting for
looking, and the
decades,
evidence shows we
clearly
have been
indicating a
looking
pattern
for
we can no
decades.
longer ignore.